Hi, it's Penny here, and today I wanted to share with you my favorite science fiction and fantasy authors. Actually, it's just my favorite authors, but they all happen to be science fiction or fantasy. And as well, the way that I figured out this list is that I've used the criteria that I've seen quite a few people talk about. Definitely Books and Lala, I think Shades of Orange, and a few other people where we're saying an author is a favorite author if we've loved at least 3 books, or like given 5 stars to at least 3 books by their author. So I wanted to go through this list and not only talk about how great all these authors are, but also talk about, like, do I think that criteria is a good way of working out who your favorite authors are? So I have one author I'm going to talk about first who isn't on this list, and I think they should be. And then I also have 10 authors where they meet the criteria, but maybe they shouldn't, and 10 authors where they meet the criteria and I think they definitely deserve to be on a list of my favorite authors. So I will leave timestamps down below if you want to jump to a particular section. But firstly, the author that I want to say should be on this list, but doesn't meet the requirements, well, I could make them fit the requirements. So the author I'm talking about is Ted Chiang. This is the movie edition of, it's actually The Stories of Your Life and Others, but they've repackaged it as like an Arrival book. Because the movie Arrival is based on one of Ted Chiang's short stories. So Ted Chiang writes these wonderfully complex science fiction stories that look at the way that science might affect, or like that these strange ideas might affect humanity, but it does it in such a way that they feel like real stories. And even though, like, sometimes I struggle to get my head around the stories, I really enjoy reading them. The thing is, he's only released 2 short story anthologies. So, like, that's only 2 books that I've rated 5 stars. I've rated them both 5 stars, but it's only 2 things, so it doesn't fit the criteria. Now, technically, though, I could call out each story separately, in which case it would easily meet the criteria. But is that cheating? I don't know. But I love Ted Chiang, and if he ever puts out another short story collection, which I'm sure he will one day, I hope he will, then I will be reading it very quickly. Okay, then my next group of books is all authors where I've loved some of their books, but all those books are from a single series. So, like, does that really count as 3 things, or is each series just one thing? I don't know, but we're going to go through these in order of, like, least books that I've loved to most books that I've loved. So firstly, we have Patrick Rothfuss, who wrote The Name of the Wind. He also wrote the sequel, The Wise Man's Fear. And then he wrote this novella that I think goes between the 2, or somewhere in there anyway, called The Slow Regard of Silent Things, following kind of this minor character. And it's such a different and beautiful book, but all of these books are written really beautifully. Primarily, we're following this guy called Quoth, as he tells the story about how he learned magic and lost his parents, and then kind of this bigger world-changing revenge plot. So I have loved everything that Patrick Rothfuss has written. The problem is that the 3rd book is nowhere to be seen. So, is he still a favorite author? I don't know. I think my patience is running out, unfortunately. Then we have Holly Black. Holly Black wrote the Cursebreakers series, this is actually called. Honestly, I picked up this first book not knowing anything about who Holly Black was. I just saw this book with a cat on the cover, so I got it. And I really liked it. It's been a while since I've read this, but I believe in this world people have different powers which are usually enacted through touch. And so people with powers are expected to wear gloves so that they can't be using their powers without people knowing. This guy's mother is a con artist, and she has like little holes in her gloves so that she can still do dodgy stuff. And like his whole family is this crime family, and there's a few mysteries going on while he's just struggling to live his life. I really loved this series, but it has been a while since I've read it, so I would like to reread it at some point. As well, even though I've loved all 3 of these books, I haven't been tempted to pick up the main series that Holly Black is now known for, the Cruel Prince series, just because I'm not really into, like, fairy romance type stories, so I really don't think it will be for me. I did also pick up The Book of Night, her adult fantasy debut, and I was pretty disappointed in that. I did read Doll Parts by her, which is like a middle grade book about a group of friends who likes to play with dolls, and then the boy gets told by his father that he's not allowed to play with dolls anymore, and all of the friend group is really having like personal issues, and they decide to steal this one expensive doll and go on a bit of an adventure. I did really like that one. but it was a middle grade book, so like not a favorite. So like, is Holly Black really a favorite? I don't know. But if we're counting books from a series separately, then she meets the criteria. Then we have Cameron Hurley, who wrote the Beldame Apocrypha series, starting with God's War. We've got Infidel and Rapture. So it's been a long time since I've read this one as well. I would love to reread it. We're following this woman called Nyx in this like science fiction world where all the technology is bug-based and everything's a little bit dystopian. And she's like a bounty hunter where she regularly cuts off people's heads because that's how you prove that you killed them, by delivering their head to your employers. But also her sister is involved in the politics of the world, and there's kind of this big conspiracy going on that she gets involved with, along with her crew. I loved her crew. And just like so many things about this, I loved it. And so I want Cameron Hurley to be a favorite author. But I did read her time travel book, The Light Brigade, and there's a lot of things to really love about that book. Can I remember enough to even talk about the synopsis? It's kind of like a dystopian world where Earth is at war with the moon, Mars, and instead of governments, it's like corporations ruling the world. And our main character, I think the most interesting thing was that for the first half of the book, you don't know the gender of the main character, and they kind of get involved in this army that's battling against the moon, Mars. Maybe it's Mars? I think it's Mars. But the battles are like using time travel, and they kind of get stuck in this weird time travel issue. And so the story is kind of told non-linearly. It's very strange, but just there were a few things that didn't quite hit for me, and so that stopped it from being a favorite. Otherwise, Cameron Hurley would be a favorite. I know she does have another trilogy that I haven't read yet, but it was her earlier trilogy, and she's been working on another book for quite a long time. So hopefully that will come out soon as well, and then maybe we can bump Cameron Hurley up onto the top tier of favorite authors. Okay, then we have one where I don't own any of the books, but that is Scotty Young and also a bunch of illustrators who wrote the I Hate Fairyland graphic novel series or comic series. So this is just following this really cute girl who gets sucked into fairyland, and she's very unhappy about being there, and she just decides that she's going to start destroying everything. And like, it's just this amazing mix of like really cute fairyland things mixed with like all this gore and guts and just like carnage, and the colors are so bright, and I love those graphic novel comics. Although I say I love them, I loved 3 of the volumes. One of the volumes, I don't really remember what I didn't like about it, because again, it's been a while since I read it, but I gave one of the volumes 2 stars and the other 3 5 stars. So like, I guess I love the series with that little problem, and I feel like there must be some thing we should be adding to the favorite author criteria, which is about like, what's the percentage of books that you've read by them that you've loved? Because if you've read, say, 4 books by an author and you've loved all of them, like, surely isn't that a more favorite author than an author where you've read like 10 books of theirs but you've only liked 5 of them? Because that's only 50%, whereas the other one is 100%. But like, you loved more books of the second one. Anyway, I'm probably overthinking this. But also, specifically for Scotty Young, I think the problem is I've looked at his other graphic novels and none of them really appeal to me. And I feel like for all the comic graphic novel book series that are on this part of the list, it's actually the concept that I liked. And sure, the author and the illustrator did a good execution of it, but unless they come up with a concept that I like as much as that one, then I just don't know if I'm going to like the rest of their stuff. And maybe that's true for all authors, but I feel like it's more true for comic and graphic books than it is for like written books. I don't know why that is though. Then the next author on the list is Scott Lynch, who wrote the Lies of Locke Lamora series. So I've got the first book here and also the third book. I really need to find the second book, but my local charity shops are not delivering also like different size books. Does that bother you? It doesn't really bother me. I'm just glad to have them. But these are following Locke Lamora and his gang of thieves and con artists as they go and do some cons, cause some trouble, and end up getting involved in like the magic and the politics of the world. I really enjoy these. But again, I'm pretty sure Scott Lynch has only ever written this series, and it's been a long time since the third book was put out. When will the fourth book come out? Who knows? He's going to write some novellas before he properly gets to the fourth book, I believe. Also, Scott Lynch is like somewhat, what's the word? problematic. There was a bunch of, what's the word I'm thinking of? So like accusations of him and his partner grooming another author. Sounded to me just like a toxic relationship from all angles. Some very bad decisions made by everyone. Does it make him a bad person? I don't know. It seems like he's been struggling a lot since then. Does that make him deserving of a redemption? I don't know, but I would love to get some more books of this series. I kind of think he's probably never... I don't know how old he is. Is he gonna die? I don't think he's that old. I don't know though whether he'll ever get beyond the series, because it's meant to be, I think, quite a long series, and he's still only halfway after like a decade? 2006 this came out, and you know I was gonna say, oh yeah, almost a decade. It's almost 2 decades. So will Scott Lynch ever get past this series? And if not, does he still deserve to be on my favourite list? And also, like, given how problematic he is, does he deserve to be on my favourite author list? I don't know. Then we have another possibly problematic fave, and that is Brent Weeks, who wrote the Black Prism series. So I've got the first book, hate this cover, and also the third book, love this cover, would love to have the whole series in these books, but again, waiting for secondhand shops to somehow deliver them to me through the workings of fate. So these books are about a world where there's color magic, and certain people who are called drafters are able to draw light and create material substance from it. Most people can only do kind of one color. Some people can do a couple, and there is a guy called the Black Prism. He's like a religious figure who's able to split light. So white light he can split into all the colors, and he can create all the different things that the different drafters can create. But there's also like so much twistiness and politics and just like awful stuff going on in this world. Also, there's a fair amount of like sexism and just like weird sex stuff and like body shaming, fat phobia. There's like some very strange things about slavery. Just lots of weird things in this book where I'm like, wow, I wish you hadn't addressed that issue that way, or I wish you hadn't said that. But regardless, I really love this series. Now, there is another series that is well loved that Brent Weeks wrote before this, but I'm somewhat scared of picking it up because I think it might be worse in terms of those elements than these books are. But like, I can overlook a certain amount of that, so maybe, especially in books that are 2 or 3 decades older, so like maybe it's worth a go. Then the next author on my list is the author of the Death Note manga. So again, I feel like I need to be counting the author and the illustrator. So these are written by Tsugumi Oba, and then the art is by Takeshi Obata. For graphic things, I feel like it's the collaboration of the author and the artist coming together. And I'm always surprised how often like I find a collaboration I really love and I think, cool, I'll read other things that they've done together, and often there isn't anything else. What is up with that? Like, if you create something really amazing together, wouldn't you want to create something else amazing together? But also, like, maybe it's just they had this great concept, they worked together well on it, and then they don't have anything else that they would want to work together on anymore. So Death Note, I don't know why I'm holding up number 12. Let's find number 1, because it's the best cover probably to talk about what this is about if you haven't heard about Death Note. So in Death Note, there's basically this Shinigami. He's like a death god, and he has this book where if you write someone's name in it, they'll die. And just because he's kind of bored, he drops it on the street, and then this guy picks it up and he decides he's going to use it to start punishing criminals. But then there is this other detective, L, who starts trying to find out who it is that's been killing all these criminals. And most of this book series is about like their battle of wits trying to discover each other, or like L trying to trick Light into giving himself away, but Light also like trying to trick L into looking in the wrong direction. So this series, it does go a bit up and down. So I don't actually know how many books I would really say I loved. I feel like I can't trust my past ratings to be exactly the ones that I rated really highly. Damn it, my battery died and I don't remember what I was saying. I think generally I was saying that I love parts of the series and not so much other parts, but definitely I loved at least 3 of these. So they meet the criteria, but again, that percentage thing, maybe is not there. Also, I did look at other things by both these creators and like nothing else really interested me. So again, I feel like it was the concept, not the creators. But I appreciate their execution. Okay, then we have the Monstrous comic graphic novel series by Sana Takeda and Marjorie Liu. So Monstrous is in this world where there are the ancients who are like these animal people type gods. We also have the old gods who are more like these demon creatures. We have the Arcanics, which I believe are the children of the ancients and the humans. So they're like humans who have animal attributes. We also have cats, and the cats in this world are like necromancers, and the more tails they have, the more magical power they have. And primarily we're following this girl named Micah who is possessed by this demon and it's eaten away one of her arms, and sometimes this demon comes out and eats people. But there's also this bigger conflict going on between the different races, and with the witches who are in power trying to use the Arcanics to create more power. It's a really interesting book, but I think what actually sells it for me, because I honestly often don't follow the plot, what really sells it for me is the art. It's so beautiful. So I know that Marjorie Liu has written another book, I think it's called The Tangleroot Palace, and I think the cover art is still done by Sana Takeda. So I would like to pick that up at some point. But I'm also interested in picking up some other things that Sana Takeda has illustrated just because her art is so beautiful. I think she's done some Dark Crystal comics as well as some other ones that looked interesting. So I haven't got into those yet, but I would like to. And then that would mean perhaps they could slip onto the other part of the favorite author list. And also this is another series where like I don't feel like every series has been like a full hit for me, so I still feel like I need to decide what is the percentage that you need to keep up to keep on my favorite author list. But how do you choose that percentage? I don't know. Maybe I need to do a bunch more maths. I'm still overthinking it, right? Okay, so it's Penny from the end of the video coming back because I realized that I missed one. So I forgot to talk about the Descender graphic novel comic series by Jeff Lemire and Dustin Nguyen. This is an amazing series where basically a bunch of giant robots turn up and just kill off a bunch of humans, and in retaliation the humans start trying to destroy all the robots, even though at this point humanity spread out across the galaxies, and there's also other races and things going on, and they're very reliant on robots. So getting rid of robots is difficult for them, but they don't want robots to be killing off a bunch of humans again. There's also kind of a group of people trying to investigate where these giant robots came from, and primarily we're following this young companion robot who's trying to track down his human family. He doesn't really know what's going on, but he does have some connection to these giant robots. Honestly, the thing that made this series for me was the robots. I am in love with all of the robots. And there was another spin-off series, Ascender. The first series had 6 volumes and then Ascender had 4 volumes. Ascender was good, but really it was my love of the characters that carried it through for me. Otherwise, I don't think it was quite as good, which I kind of take as evidence that you can't just say, I love this concept, so I'm definitely going to love things by the same creators. Because even though I did love Ascender, if they did something else, would I? Maybe not. Then the last book on this section of this list, even though it's very long already, I feel like. Anyway, the last one is Lemony Snicket. I love A Series of Unfortunate Events, which I think is 13 books long, so that's why it's the one where I love the most books. Unfortunately, again, rumor has it that Daniel Handler, who is actually Lemony Snicket, is kind of a dick. So like, that's a shame. Do I want him on the favorite author list? As well, he hasn't really written anything else. Like, I think he's written some other things, but nothing I'd be interested in. I just feel like, again, A Series of Unfortunate Events is just like a concept that was well executed, but doesn't necessarily indicate that he could do anything like that again, or at least he hasn't shown himself to be able to do anything like that again, even though A Series of Unfortunate Events was finished quite a long time ago now. So if you haven't heard about A Series of Unfortunate Events, it follows the Baudelaire orphans. After their parents die, they basically get shipped off to different distant relatives as they try to find a new place to live. Unfortunately, every place they go to stay is very strange and leads to a series of unfortunate events where they then need to move on. They're also discovering the mystery around their parents' death. But the thing that really makes this book series is just the way that it's written. There's a very specific voice to the narration, and just like a specific sense of humor. And even though it's a kid's book, it's still like very dark in some ways. Dark but fun. I love dark but fun. So I love it, but again, does Lemony Snicket belong on my favourite authors list? I think no. Anyway, let us move on to the next part of my favourite authors list. So this is authors where I have loved at least 3 books by them, and those 3 things weren't all from the same series. I have to admit, the first one I'm going to talk about, I still feel like is debatable whether they're my favourite author. So the one I'm talking about is Seanan McGuire. So, I loved Middle Game so much, but then the sequel, crap, so pointless, nothing happens. And the spin-off Middle Grade series, what the hell is that? I've had such a terrible time with those 4 books. As well, Seanan McGuire writes the Wayward Children series about children who found magical doors and then got stuck back in the real world. And there have been 2 books from that series that I really love. So I loved Down Among the Sticks and Bones and also In an Absent Dream. I do need to reread those though. If I didn't love them on a reread, maybe Seanan McGuire would bump off the list. But like also, I think there's been 8, a lot of books released in the Wayward Children series, and it's only been those 2 that I've loved. Some of the other books in that series I've found very disappointing. And then I did also really like Into the Drowning Deep by Mira Grant, which is a pen name for Seanan McGuire. So like, there's definitely a lot of things that I've liked by Seanan McGuire. She meets the 3 thing criteria because we've got this one. I think I only gave this 4 stars though. That 2 Wayward Children books and Middle Game. Middle Game is amazing. It's like these 2 children, one with the power of language and one with the power of maths, and these alchemists trying to manipulate them into becoming gods so that then they can control them to get what they want. But these 2 children go in their own direction. I love that book and I reread it again, loved it again. But I've just had such a terrible time lately with everything I've picked up by Seanan McGuire that I struggle to say that she's a favourite author. Anyway, let's move on from authors that I'm doubting and move on to authors that I definitely love. The next one is Andy C. Buchanan. This is a New Zealand author. They are non-binary and autistic, and I mention that specifically because they often write characters who are non-binary and autistic, and I love their own voices representation. I really love this one, From a Shadow Grave, even though I think I need to reread it. It was kind of like 3 ghost stories that like linked together. Often their things are very short. I also really enjoyed Succulents and Spells, which is about some witches in Wellington just kind of dealing with some magic problems while trying to live their lives, kind of cozy fantasy. I didn't necessarily love it because I'm a little bit more plot driven, and I decided not to continue the series for that reason. But I also read This Other World by them, which is like this autistic character living on another planet because they find the culture of that world suits them much more. But then they get involved kind of in this conspiracy murder mystery that's going on. I want to give that one a reread as well because I loved it so much, but it's been a long time. And then there was also a short story by them called Invisible City, which I think was only a few pages long, but I love that. Again, it's been a while since I read it, and I feel like I don't really remember enough to give a solid synopsis. But like, I definitely remember loving it. As well, right at the moment, I'm reading Sanctuary by them, and so far, even though I'm only a couple of chapters in, I'm loving this one as well. It's like found family with a bunch of neurodivergent and differently abled people, and also some ghosts. And so far, yep, loving that. So Andy C. Buchanan, probably my most favourite New Zealand author. Then we have Emma Carey. So this is Someone Like Me, which is just a standalone. This is kind of like a very strange horror about this woman who's in a domestic violence situation. And at a certain point when she's having this conflict with her husband, she feels like she loses control, becomes somebody else. There's also another girl who suffered quite a massive trauma when she was young, and as a result she has a lot of mental difficulties, and they end up meeting each other and through that figuring out what's going on and like the connections between the 2 of them. It's very hard to talk about this book without spoiling it, but I loved it. It was dark, but I loved it. As well, Emma Carey wrote The Girl with All the Gifts, and the sequel to that, The Boy on the Bridge, which is like a post-apocalyptic zombie series. It's not really a series. Each book could be read as a standalone, although there are connections between the two. So in the first book, we're following this girl named Melanie as she attends her school, but for some reason, her and all her classmates are tied up while they're in the classroom and then get put back in cages every night. What could be going on? But I think what actually I liked about all of these M.R. Carey books is like the way that he uses horror to like talk about the philosophy of life and just like human analysis. M.R. Carey is one where there's a bunch of books that he has put out that I have not read and I would love to. So I feel like he's going to bump up this list if I ever get to them. I hope so. I hope he doesn't let me down. Then next on my list we have Kat Howard. So Kat Howard wrote Roses and Rot, which is like a dark academia book about these two sisters who go to an art school where they end up competing to win a prize. Again, don't want to spoil it, but the Fae are involved. Maybe some people are making deals. I really love that one. Kat Howard also wrote An Unkindness of Magicians, which is about this magic tournament that the unseen world is undergoing to decide which magical house is going to be in charge of the magical world. And there's a few different players involved in that, trying to change the way that magic works or that power works within this world. That actually has a sequel coming up very soon. In fact, I think it just released a couple of days ago. A Sleight of Shadows. Super excited to read that. As well, Kat Howard did put out a short story anthology called A Cathedral of Myth and Bone. And I often don't like short story anthologies, even though I already mentioned I love Ted Chiang's ones. But I also really like Kat Howard's one. Just a lot of stories about stories and myths. So great. Definitely recommend any of her books. Then the next author on my list is Ryan Groudon, who wrote Wolf by Wolf. This is a duology. The second book was called Blood for Blood, and there was also a novella in the middle called Iron to Iron. So this series is an alternate history where the Nazis won the war, and our main character is going to participate in a motorcycle race because the winner gets to dance with Hitler and she wants to kill him. I don't think the back talks about the most interesting element of this, the wolf element, but I really love this series a lot. And then as well, Ryan Groudon wrote this time travel book, Invictus. I have seen a lot of bad reviews for this, but I really had a lot of fun with it. It's basically about this guy who kind of struggles because he doesn't have a birthday because he was born to time travelers. But he was born while they were traveling, so in between times. Also, they weren't supposed to be having him. As well, in this world, time travel is like highly regulated because they don't want to cause any problems in the past that might change the future. But this guy ends up, because he can't get a job because he doesn't have a birthday, he ends up forming this like criminal time travel group that goes back and steals things just before they're about to be destroyed, so nobody will miss them, and then he can bring them back to the future and sell them for extreme amounts of money. But he ends up running into this other girl and things get very strange. I really loved it. I had a lot of fun. Some people said it was kind of stupid, that there were parts where it was just like the crew hanging out that didn't really seem important to the plot, which honestly sounds like a criticism I would make, but I was just having fun hanging out with them, so I don't know, but I really loved it. There is one other book by Ryan Groudon, The Walled City, that I haven't read, that I would like to read, but it seems like recently, since she released this one, she's just been writing middle grade books that, again, I'm not interested in. So, like, that's kind of sad because maybe she's my favorite author and maybe she'll never write anything I'm interested in ever again. What a depressing thought. Okay, so the next author on my list is Victoria Schwab. I have a lot of her books, actually, even though I didn't love all of these, but I think I liked all of these. So Vicious is one that I loved. This is one where there are people with extraordinary abilities and a couple of university students exploring how people get these abilities, and I love the way that it works, and I loved their conflict. Another one that I loved is the Darker Shade of Magic series. Specifically, the first book was my favorite. I think the next two weren't quite as good, but in this we have Kel, who's able to travel between the different Londons. So we have Grey London, which is our London, Red London, which has like beautiful magic, White London, which is really like starving from magic, and then Black London that's been locked off because magic did something really bad there. And Cal is a very naughty guy. He is smuggling things between worlds when he shouldn't be, which gets him in a lot of trouble. I really like that series. I do think it's really good, and I'll be interested to see what Victoria Schwab does with the spin-off series that is coming out later in the year. I've seen her say that she's been saying for years that she was writing the spin-off series, and then still people would hear her say that and be like, are you? And be surprised. So like, very soon it's coming out. The other one that I loved on this pile was actually The Dark Vault, which this is a bind-up of 2 books. What were they called? The Archived and The Unbound. To be honest, I didn't like The Unbound as much, but I loved The Archived. We're following this girl whose job is to make sure... Actually, what's the best way to describe this? So in this world, there is a library of the dead, or at least the memories of the dead are stored in this archive. And this young girl got the job from her grandfather, who unfortunately died when she was very young. So she had to take this responsibility on sooner than she might have, where she has to stop any memories from escaping this archive. The first book was beautiful. The second one was still good, but not quite as good. The third one, there's meant to be a third one at some point. Will it ever happen? Who knows? I like to imagine there will be. Victoria Schwab also wrote The Monsters of Verity duology, where violent acts create monsters. Kind of love that one, but I think it could have been better. Same with Vengeful, which is the sequel to Vicious. I just wish that it hadn't focused so much on the characters from the first book and had gotten into the main character Marcella's perspective a lot more, because she was so badass. And instead we just kept focusing on these stupid boys. Disappointing. As well, we have The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue. This is a book that a lot of people love, but for me, I wish the magic of it all had been explored more. So we have Addie LaRue, who can't ever be remembered. As soon as people walk away from her, they forget about her. She can't write anything down or leave any kind of record that people could remember her by. So she can only really influence people by inspiring them, or like to create something new. So the idea is really cool, and the story is okay, but like, she also lives forever. So like 300 years and she did nothing. Or like, it mentions a few things, but we didn't actually get to see it, and I felt that was disappointing. She also wrote Gallant, which is another one where really love the concept, but I just felt like it needed a little bit more. I sometimes feel like Victoria Schwab has slipped into being one of those authors who's just pumping out books so fast that she never quite finishes them as well as they could have been finished if they'd had a bit more time to them. But like, I still really like Victoria Schwab. I'm always just a little bit disappointed, but I'm always hoping that her next book will be better. Or at least better for me, because let's be honest, lots of people love this. It's just not quite what would have suited me. So maybe this is another thing with favorite authors. Like, maybe you've loved lots of things by them, but now their writing style is heading in a direction that suits other people's tastes and not yours. At what point do you decide that they're no longer a favorite author of yours? Okay, then we have an author that I feel like has brute forced his way onto my favorite authors list, but also is maybe one where, again, is he heading in a direction where I can't follow, or I don't want to follow? Maybe. So of course I'm talking about Brandon Sanderson. Mistborn specifically is a series that I absolutely loved, where we have allomancers who ingest metals to get different magical powers, and they're trying to bring down the evil dictator of the world through some kind of heist. I love this series, all the twists and turns and the way that it's constructed and the characters. All the magic. I love this series. It's definitely my favorite Sanderson series, but I also love Elantris, where this godlike city has been corrupted, and now the people of the city can never heal themselves but also never die, and so they're living with this constant pain, and like every time they get hurt the pain increases. I really love this one. I also really loved, or at least really liked, Warbreaker. My edition is a piece of crap from a little library. Fate, please bring me a better copy. But this is one where there's so many things going on. We have gods. In fact, one of our characters is a god who doesn't really believe himself to be a god. We also have this idea that everybody has one breath, and breaths can be used to do magic, but you can give your breaths to someone else. And so like certain people, including these gods, have like accumulated lots of breaths, which allows them to do a lot of magic. And The magic is also somewhat colour-based in this, right? I can't remember. I need to reread it again. I feel like my reread list is just getting longer and longer. There are other books that Brandon Sanderson has written, like The Many Lives of Stephen Leeds and Snapshot, that like I've enjoyed, but they're not favourites, probably. I do really love the Stormlight Archives, and I have these beautiful editions. You know what, I don't think The Way of Kings is the most beautiful book in the series, but this one probably has beautiful art. Oh look, lovely. Like, these books are so chunky and so complex that I'm definitely not going to give you a synopsis here, but these I have been really loving. And I haven't read Rhythm of War yet, but I'm expecting to love it. I hope I love it, because I really want to keep getting these beautiful books. But then, most recently, Brandon Sanderson has been doing these secret project books. So far I've only gotten the first one. The second one should be on its way soon. And like, I didn't mind Tress. I quite liked it. I had some problems with it. Secret Project 2, The Frugal Wizard's Guide to Medieval England. Really didn't like it. And it really reminded me of the Cytonic series. So Skyward, I absolutely loved. We've got this girl named Spencer who lives on this planet where humans can't leave, because anytime they try to leave, they get attacked by aliens, and her family's reputation was really damaged when her father flew away from a fight, and so she's really struggling to be allowed to fight. But then after the first book in that series, I felt like things got a little bit silly. The humor wasn't really jiving with me, and that's how I've been feeling about a few of Brandon Sanderson's later books, is that like he's just having a lot of fun writing these humorous books, and unfortunately that's not what I love him for. I love him for his complex fantasy and his amazing magic systems. So hopefully he won't give that up though. Okay, now we're up to the top 3. So firstly, we have Maggie Stiefvater, who wrote The Raven Cycle. I love this series. It's so strange and lyrical, but also just like this group of friends hanging out. We've got Blue, who's always been told by her psychic family that the first boy she kisses is going to die. So she's been trying to avoid kissing anyone. But we also have Gansey, who's trying to find a dead Welsh king because he believes that will grant him some wishes. We also have Ronan and Adam, who have magic of their own, sort of. I don't want to spoil things, but I really love this series, and it of course helps that these books are beautiful. Then I also read by her All the Crooked Saints, which again is so beautiful and lyrical and strange. The magic in this world is this family is able to grant miracles, but the miracles are always made up of 2 parts. So the first part basically changes this person who's come for a miracle. It changes their darkness into something tangible that they have to deal with. Usually it's something not very nice, and it's only through working through that then they can achieve the second miracle, which is getting back to normal. But just the way this is written, so beautiful. I loved it. Oh, and I forgot to mention, actually, I also love the spin-off series to The Raven Cycle, which is the Dreamers trilogy, following Adam and Ronan's brothers and a bunch of new characters as they kind of come up against another group who wants to kill off all magic users because they think the magic users are going to bring about the end of the world. I really love that series. And also, I really loved this trilogy by Maggie Stiefvater. You'll be thinking it's a trilogy, but you've only got 2 books. That's because she only ever wrote 2 books, and the third book will never exist, sadly, because these are written like not quite in Maggie Stiefvater's writing style, although this is the second book and it gets close. So this is about these music students who get involved with the Fae. In some ways it's a little bit like Twilight because the Fae are very dangerous, but it's not like a lot of fairy romance, fairy porn type books because it's teens, but also they're like musicians, and the magic and the fairies are so music based but also so dangerous. I love these. So Maggie Stiefvater definitely belongs on the list. I did also read a graphic novel by her called Swamp Thing that I really liked. I still need to read Brave by her, which is like a Brave Merida Disney retelling. Oh, and I also read the Shiver series by her, which I really loved, which is about these werewolves, but they only change into werewolves when the temperature gets cold enough. So like over winter, they'll be werewolves, and then over summer, they'll be humans. And I think like as they get older, they tend to stay as wolves for longer and longer. I really enjoyed that series as well. So Maggie Stiefvater belongs on the list for sure. Okay then, if you watch my videos often, you had to know this one was coming. I love Robin Hobb. This is the Assassin's Apprentice, the Farseer trilogy, about Fitz, who is the son, illegitimate son of the king in waiting, and he gets brought to court. Nobody really wants him there, so he ends up being trained as an assassin, but there's so much more going on in this world. Robin Hobb is amazing at developing characters. There's also the Live Ship Traders trilogy, which comes after that, set in the same world but following this trading family where they have these live ships that once 3 generations of the family have died on the ship gains its own sentience, becomes alive. But there's also, again, so much going on in this world. There's also the Rainwell Chronicles, where we have dragons. There's dragons in this one too, actually. And then the Tawny Man trilogy, where again we have dragons. Are there dragons on any of the covers? Yes, this one has dragons on the cover. I really love the whole Realm of the Elderlings, but it's not just the Realm of the Elderlings by Robin Hobb that I love. That's 16 books of amazing character development, really subtle magic. Like, the magic is really part of the world and part of the character's experience of the world. I could go on about the Realm of the Elderlings for ages, but I won't. A lot of people have heard about it. But for Robin Hobb to have made it onto this part of the list, there has to be something other than the Realm of the Elderlings. I'm not cheating and just saying each trilogy is its own thing. But also, I read this book, The Inheritance, which has a bunch of short stories by both Robin Hobb and Megan Lindholm, but Megan Lindholm is Robin Hobb. They are the same person. So even though I think most of the short stories in here that are written by Robin Hobb are actually Realm of the Elderlings short stories, the Megan Lindholm ones are more speculative or science fiction-y, and some of them I absolutely loved, including the first story, A Touch of Lavender. Oh, I love that story. I just, right now, right this second, I want to read it again. It's about these aliens that come to Earth kind of as like refugees or like exiled from their own world, and they are able to make sounds like through their skin. And like that's how they mimic human voice so that they can communicate. But they also like believe that creating music is against their religion. And so they're always like recreating human music. And we're following this young boy whose mother ends up having like a romantic relationship with this one particular alien. And just like the way that she depicts the poverty that this family is in, and like the struggles of these aliens and the dynamics. Again, it's the character development and the dynamics between the characters. I love it. As well, Megan Lindholm wrote Wizard of the Pigeons. Wizard of the Pigeons is about this homeless man, and he really struggles to keep touch with reality. Is it because he's a wizard dealing with all these issues and talking with all his wizard friends, or is it because he's an army vet and he is struggling with everything that happened there? Or is it both? It's never really clear, but it's just written so beautifully. Again, it comes down to Robin Hobb's character development, but also just the way that she takes time to describe things. Anyway, I love her. Oh yeah, and I've just remembered, I have these 2 books here, which are from her Soldier Sun trilogy. Unfortunately, I've only got books 2 and books 3, but again, if fate would bring me book 1, when I catch up on all my series, I will definitely be reading this one. And then lastly, my top favorite author, I want to say Can You Guess, but actually they've been sitting right here the whole video, so like you probably can. So that is Ilona Andrews, the author of the Kate Daniels series. So Ilona Andrews is actually a husband and wife writing team, although I really do think Ilona, the wife, does most of the writing and the husband helps out. But anyway, husband and wife writing duo from Russia, living in America. And I just love the way that they write characters and action and snark and relationships and just like the pacing. And I love their books, all of their books. So the Kate Daniels series, initially the covers are not great. This is the first book, Magic Bites, but we're following Kate Daniels, who is a mercenary in this world where magic is coming back in waves. So sometimes magic works, sometimes technology works, and Kate has some family secrets that you slowly learn about, and kind of the bigger conflict builds up until we get to this final book. And I just love every single book in the Kate Daniels series. Definitely one of my most favorite series. I have all the books here, but there is also the spin-off where we follow her adopted daughter. So far only the first book is out, but hopefully we'll get some more. She did also do another spin-off series, the Iron Covenant series, which she hasn't continued, and I don't know when she's going to get to that one. I don't think it's sold that well because it's kind of following kind of a villain in this hate to love, forced marriage type fantasy romance. And like, normally I don't like fantasy romance, but I still really enjoyed that. She also wrote The Hidden Legacy. So The Hidden Legacy is 2 trilogies, a little novella in the middle, following these 3 sisters who have magical powers. The magical powers in this world are kind of genetic based, but it all kind of came from this initial serum that kind of set up these magical abilities through people's bloodlines. So the older sister is able to tell whether people are lying or not, and then the second sister is able to make people love her. And there's all sorts of different magical abilities that people have in this world, and they kind of get very involved in the politics of the world while they're investigating these murders as part of their like private investigation company. That series as well is quite fantasy romance, but there's still so much great plot and great action and just like the characters. I love all the characters. In fact, while Kate Daniels has a lot of found family, the Hidden Legacy series is like actual family, and I love that family. So like, I just really can't imagine Alona Andrews ever putting out anything that I wouldn't love. Like, everything I've read by them, amazing. So anyway, I think I have well over an hour of footage of me talking about a bunch of amazing authors, and also authors who are kind of amazing, but maybe not like favorite author amazing. I don't know. Let me know your thoughts about what makes an author a favorite author. Is there like some criteria that you think you can put in place to decide whether an author is a favorite author, or is it like more of a feeling? Can you make an author a favorite author after one book? Maybe. Anyway, let's chat down in the comments. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time.